What is up, everybody? I'm NoLucksGiven, and today we're going to be taking a look at the February 7th patch notes, kind of a smaller patch. As it says on the screen here, this patch was really done just to address how many pumpkins there have been, and I talk about that a little bit in my videos yesterday, and then also today there was just a lot of pumpkins running around. So this is the main change that we are going to be seeing from this patch. Pumpkin is going to change from a 5 cost 2/2 to a 6 cost 10/10, and this does a number of things other than just making it cost 1 more gold and giving it +8/+8 more stats. That isn't really the big things at play here. The big things are some of the things going on behind the scene that I did talk about a lot in my video yesterday. Too many pumpkins. I think the title of the video was why Pumpkin needed to get nerfed in this patch, or why Pumpkin needed to get patched, or something like that. So there's a lot more 5 cost units than there are 6 cost units. And I don't mean that there are more different 5 cost units that you can pick up. I mean that in the shop, the number of bossies, for instance, there are a lot more bossies than there are lordies. And that just meant that when Pumpkin was on 5, it was a lot more accessible, it was a lot easier to triple it, and it was a lot easier for a lot of other players to be able to grab it. Also, it meant that you could more reliably buy XP and rush to try to get to level 5, because once you were there, you had Pumpkin as a rather big payoff. So we saw me make use of XP, I think, in both the games that I've uploaded the past 2 days, and that's been really strong. Another thing that I think is kind of a secret benefit of costing 5 compared to 6 is that a lot of the treasures on tier 5, one that we're going to be talking about later in this patch, but a lot of the treasures on tier 5 synergize better with the pumpkin. It's really, I'll just spoil it, it's the monkey's paw really synergizes well with the pumpkin, whereas pumpkin doesn't really have tier 6 treasures that it cares about as much. So tripling a pumpkin on 6, it's going to be harder because there's less pumpkins available. And then it's also just not going to be giving you the best treasures, as opposed to just giving you Monkey's Paw, which is one of the best treasures that the Great Pumpkin King can bring. So that's mostly what the pumpkin, everything with the pumpkin considered covered. And yeah, some additional information in the videos that I've been putting out both today and yesterday. Ultimately, I think that one of the tricky issues with the pumpkin is it feels unfair to lose to it, and it doesn't feel that satisfying to win with it because you have so little control over what the pumpkin is actually going to be spawning. It's not totally true. You do obviously have some control with like the level of the creatures that you create, but of course what actually comes out of it, like there's a huge difference between pumpkin being on 5. That means that when the pumpkin dies in its place, especially if it attacks and dies, you're going to get a 4-drop in that spot, and that 4-drop could be Medusa. And that could just obviously work out really, really well, because then you've got a bunch of frontline stuff, and then your Medusa is next up to attack. So there's a lot of really weird things with Pumpkin moving from 5 to 6. I think this is going to make things harder for the Pumpkin King, but one thing that I've also been saying too is they nerfed Copycat Good Boy an incredible amount, and then they also buffed both pumpkin strategies and dwarf strategies. So no kidding, pumpkins and dwarves were going to be everywhere when Good Boy was nowhere to be found. I'd still potentially like to see a Good Boy buff in the future if we don't start to see some more good late game strategies emerge, but we'll see how Pumpkin moving to 6 alone will shake things up. It'll certainly make games be a little bit longer, because another thing that was really annoying about Pumpkin is the fact that it could just get you for way more damage than felt appropriate once it summoned a board of potentially upgraded things when you were looking at the upgraded Pumpkin. So there's enough words on the great Pumpkin King. Let's talk about the other big bad comp that is currently wrecking a lot of lobbies, and that is Dwarves. And ideally, Dwarves is an interesting comp because it should almost be a comp that is really good when you're in like the 1000s or 2000s, when you are kind of climbing and learning the game, because it's so straightforward. It's very easy to just, okay, that has the word dwarf on it, I buy it. Very, very easy to go forward with that. But there should be more complicated strategies and synergies that are able to outpace dwarves as you climb the ranks. And it's a really tough balance to find, because you want dwarves to be good enough that it's not just a trap for new players. That's a little bit cruel. If you have all of these cards that say Dwarf Matters that you can see as early as the first turn of the game with Fanny, that is the first tribal synergy that you even discover in Storybook Brawl. So there's got to be something there. But of course, it's very easy to turn that knob too much. So we're going to see a small dial back for Princess White, basically keeping the exact same ability, exact same stats, but she's now giving your dwarves +1/+1 instead of +1/+2. And we've seen this happen a few times in various patches. Actually, I don't know if we've ever seen +1/+2 down to +1/+1. We've seen +2/+1 get nerfed down to +1/+1, but this is going to be a slightly different nerf here, and I think this is fine. There are obviously some dwarves that care about having health, and it certainly hurts angry and greedy, and I could definitely see picking up those two dwarves in particular a lot less. Obviously, it's also going to hurt something like doubly. I mean, it's going to hurt all of the dwarves, except for maybe like Lucky. But some of the dwarves don't feel as affected by it because they don't really need the health as well. Like Tweedledum, it's better to have it for sure, but it's not going to feel like a complete loss. And I do think that this change is pretty straightforward. I don't actually see it impacting dwarves that much, which is maybe a good thing. Like I said, I do think dwarves should still be playable. My issue with dwarves is that I think too many other things as far as late game comps, namely those good boy strategies, not existing, mean that there's very little reason to pivot off of dwarves. And I actually think that dwarves has some of the best synergies now with tier 6 and tier 7 treasures, mainly Phoenix Feather and Magic Sword. But I think that hurting them a little bit could be good, and I still don't think this is the final form that we're going to see of Princess White, but it is the form that we're going to get at least for another few weeks. Monkey's Paw, I did briefly touch on this one a few moments ago, but this is going to go from +6/+6 to +5/+5. Sure. I don't know. The main thing that I'll say is that I think, and I say this, you've heard me say this before, if you've heard me do other patch reviews or other similar stuff on stream or what have you, I think that evil comps lack late game treasure support. and Monkey's Paw is one of the best late game treasures for those evil comps, and so losing it is a little bit awkward. And I hope that they can add some type of, like, honestly, I'd even be down to see some type of Evil Matters treasure on tier 6 that just says, like, whenever an evil unit dies, or whenever you summon an evil unit, or something like that, whenever you purchase an evil unit, maybe. Something like that that gives you a little bit more of an incentive to rock some of those evil characters later. At the same time, I'm also asking for a buff on Good Boy, I know. But I do think that most tier 6 and tier 7 treasures work out a little bit better with some of those good synergies. Another change that we are going to see is a change to Merlin, and I kind of briefly talked about this one too when talking about white. Merlin's going to go from +2/+1 down to just +1/+1. And Merlin, I had been playing as a pretty weird hero on the patch. My win rate with it was not incredibly high. My first place finishes with Merlin. But my ability to just force out like a second place pretty reliably, I think, was quite strong on the past patch. And I'm not sure if this necessarily changes Merlin that much. I think that it does change the possibility to do what I thought was previously the best strategy with Merlin, which was just to play best board and play as many spells as you could every single turn to try to just create the strongest board at any given time, and then start to pick up those monster books as soon as you hit tier 4 to just keep casting spells. And that was generally enough to just be strong, have a high health total, and do some powerful things in the lobby. I know a lot of people have also been expressing frustration with Hatball recently, which I personally have no issues with. But if you do dislike Hatball, once Hatball gets going, obviously Merlin is one of the strongest heroes to be able to use the Hatball. So that is certainly something that I could see them wanting to scale back. If you're a Hatball player against a Merlin Hatball player, the Merlin is just going to be able to get way more buffs than you can, and there's not too much that you can do about that. So, overall, I think it's fine, but I do think that, and I forget where I saw this, if this was, I believe it was just randomly on Discord. Someone said, I wish that they had buffed other heroes instead of nerfing Merlin. And I do kind of feel like I have to agree with that slightly, because Merlin is like one of the better free heroes. And so to see it get nerfed in this way, I think was a little unfortunate, because it is something that everybody has access to, obviously, but then also just able to do some sweet things. And there's so many heroes that aren't even really getting to do anything cool. And like I mainly think about like Ivella doesn't really feel good to play. Galahad doesn't really feel good to play. And I would certainly love to see, especially with Pumpkin moving up on the ladder, a buff to Ivella, a buff to maybe not Galahad, but it's certainly not exciting Galahad right now. And I'd love to see some buffs as well to some of our other forgotten favorites. Another change we're going to see on this patch is Horde Dragon down to 40, and this one is something that a lot of high-level players have been saying basically as soon as Horde Dragon was given the bonus health, that it's just too much. Horde Dragon is basically the best or one of the best endgame heroes, and it's not too shabby in the early game either. as you're allowed to just pick up 2-drops and get some of those powerful tier 3 treasures. So I do think Horde Dragon just doesn't need the help, and if it loses some, that's fine, because it still remains one of the best things to, for instance, like dream into in the late game. Once you're already level 6, then the ability to just grab a bunch of tier 7 treasures is obviously insanely powerful. So this change makes a lot of sense. We're going to see that health get thrown onto King Midas, and this also makes a lot of sense. We can take a look. King Midas was the lowest average placement hero on the previous patch. This data is from Storybook or SBBtracker.com. And you can see King Midas is almost never winning. I am also going to take a look at the data for Horde Dragon and Merlin in a moment. But King Midas just like never winning, never really being able to do well. It's kind of sweet. It does something unique, but it just really isn't that strong. And I don't think this is enough. I think that King Midas should just get the full treatment all the way up to 50. I don't think we're going to see that number change too much just from 5 additional health. I think Midas still needs a little bit more health, even with the fact that he is now gaining treasures from questing units. I think that both of these changes aren't enough. There's some really weird stuff that goes on with King Midas. It is a weak hero in the early game because the one thing that it does, upgrade units when you double them, can be kind of a drawback. We're going to see a video at some point on the channel where my opening shop of the game has 2 Sherwood Sure Shots. And if I were to pick up that second Sherwood Sure Shot, I'm basically just guaranteeing that I'm going to start losing some combat. So 4-2 upgraded Sure Shot is strong, but it still just trades with Cinderella. So that is something that really hurts Midas and just means that this like supposedly aggressive hero just winds up taking way too much damage in the early game, and you never really find enough treasures to do much of anything with. So I do think that Midas still needs some more health yet. And that is basically it. They fixed one little bug. I did want to look at some other stats though as well from Merlin and Horde Dragon. This is also kind of a plug for SBBtracker.com. Definitely check it out if you haven't already. You can filter data to look at all matches, mythic only or non-mythic only. I'm going to keep it on non-mythic only right here and sort by average placement. The other thing that you can do is you can see how the placements actually break down, and you can also see that something like Grandmother doesn't have that many matches played, only 110 matches with, 37 people getting first place finishes with it. So it doesn't have that much data for some of the heroes that are less played, but it does have a ton of data for some of these heroes that are really fun and played frequently, which also consists of free heroes. It's going to have Wonder Waddle in there, which Wonder Waddle's basically a free hero because it's like the first hero that anybody buys because it's super sweet. But if we can also just look at these free heroes here, we've got over 1,000 games on both Horde Dragon and Merlin. And that means that this data gets to be pretty accurate, and you can see the distribution of finishes for Horde Dragon. We really tend to see a lot of first place finishes, and Merlin, actually, like I said, there are more second place finishes. That's surprising to see. I said that without having looked at this, but a lot of second place finishes with Merlin, which still really bring up the average finish. And overall, both of these heroes are pretty strong. We are going to see really strong performance by Geppetto as well. That one's going to take care of itself because Geppetto is no longer going to have access to the Great Pumpkin King on level 5, but Merlin and Horde Dragon potentially a little bit too strong. I mean, it's hard to say that. I will say these 3 heroes up here, I mean, Fallen Angel also, I think was really good on the previous patch because of how it synergized with the pumpkin. You basically just treated Fallen Angel like it had a built-in Ring of Rage, all of your creatures getting +2 attack, and abandoned the +2 health from playing good units. And so Fallen Angel, I think, was really good from this past patch. That one's going to come down itself as well. Grandmother also, obviously, really able to take advantage of the bonus from hitting tier 6 with your pumpkins. Cursed King is an interesting one to see here at the top of the tables, and Zelhua is also kind of interesting too. I think Zelhua benefited a little bit from the pumpkin costing 5, but there's some other cool things that Zelhua can still do. But Horde Dragon and Merlin, it's tough to say how good free heroes should be. I don't think that they should necessarily be worse than paid heroes. Not that there is a huge difference between freed heroes and paid heroes anyways, because the game is so accessible. But certainly these things are strong, and could definitely see a little bit of a toning down of some of those things. But at the very least, you guys can go and check out Storybook Brawl Tracker yourself. And by the time you check it, I'm not sure if the data from the previous patch will be there, but you can still see it for the future patches, and it can help you inform your decisions for what heroes you guys want to pick. I think that's going to be it for me for this video. Oh yeah, and by the way, King Midas all the way down here at the bottom. Am a little bit surprised to see Sadrak and Trophy Hunter down on the bottom too. I wonder if that's a little bit because Trophy Hunter, people are willing to do such silly things. But yeah, certainly a lot of these other heroes down here line up to expectations, and then you see some of these more powerful heroes at the top. So the goal isn't necessarily to have all of these be completely flat, but of course you do want to, I don't know, I mean, maybe they do like want to have some level of flatness to us. It certainly doesn't feel great to have like Miri and Snow Angel down here and not really be like exciting heroes either. So I don't know, just some more food for thought there. But I'm going to call it here. I think that I've talked enough about this patch. Let me know what you guys think about it in the comments down below, and that is going to be it for me for this one. Thank you guys very much for watching. I'm NoLucksGiven. Peace.